Hello and welcome to episode 32 of HardcoreGaming101.net's top 47,858 games of all time podcast, where we objectively, definitively, and scientifically rank the games you nominate. My name is Xerxes, and I will sing with all the voices of the mountains, and I can paint with all the colors of the winds. My panelists today are...
I'm Bobinator.
I'm Carl.
I'm Satanga.
On this podcast, we have three rules. Rule number one, all rankings are final, official, and scientifically accurate, which means no backsies. Rule number two, you can nominate one game via a 5-star review on iTunes or Stitcher. That's right, we've stopped accepting nominations via Twitter for the time being. We just have way too many 5-star reviews to go through. And for that, I thank you all. Rule number three, you can nominate games that have already been nominated. Just don't nominate games we've already ranked. You want to see which games have been nominated and which games have been ranked? Check out the master list at bit.ly/47k games. That's bit.ly/47k games. Okay, so the next game we're talking about is StarTropics, one word, which was nominated by @TreehouseJPN on Twitter. It was developed by Nintendo IRD and Locomotive Corporation and published by Nintendo for the NES. Earliest release date was December 1st, 1990 in North America. And quite fitting because this game is clearly aimed directly at the wallets of North American parents in 1990. So
it wasn't even released in Japan, I believe, or at least it was never intended for release. They built it for the U.S. market.
I don't think it was released in Japan, which is amazing because this is one of the rare, Western, releases for the NES that did not get a Famicom release. And this is one of the games that I would say, like, if you were a Japanese Famicom game collector, you would really feel slighted at not having this. Because
so it's kind of the NES equivalent of Secret of Evermore.
I would, I would say so.
Comparison. Yeah.
Well, no, it is, but Secret of Evermore was released in Japan, right?
Crap, I don't remember. We'll talk more about that if it ever gets nominated. But focus on StarTropics. That's a good point, Bob. Though that it is a Secret of Evermore-esque game in the sense that it was designed with the North American market in mind, based on what the company, in this case Nintendo, knew about what players in that region wanted, and what they wanted in this case was more Zelda. Give us more Zelda, and that's what they got.
They gave them kind of a janky-ish Zelda-ish thing.
It's janky, but it's very, very... I mean, even for late NES games, this is a very polished game. It's janky in the sense that it's a little bit too hard, I think. But in terms of, like... it's got that weird, like, which we have to talk about, like, the whole, like, secret message that you have to decode by putting something in water, I believe.
You get a letter from your uncle in the game's packaging, and you are instructed to dunk his letter in water to reveal a code that you'll need later on in the game.
Is this like the first console game with copy protection, I wonder?
I don't think that's what it was for. I think it was just a nifty thing that they did.
Yeah, you can say it's copy protection in a sense, but it's not very good copy protection as a general rule, because copy protection shouldn't be a single code that never changes that you could just hand to your friend on like whatever the number is. I think it's like,
it should be like, what is the,
yeah, like it gives you like a 500-page manual of just gibberish, and it's like, on page 307, line 89, what is the third word from the right? It's like, oh, God damn it.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing. So with StarTropics, Zelda was incredibly popular for the NES, and it was probably Nintendo's biggest hit easily, other than Super Mario Brothers. It was a huge hit. They got tons and tons of calls about it. Zelda 2 was also a huge hit, but did not really, like, players did not, at least in my experience or in my neck of the woods, it was not like nobody was talking about Zelda 2 really. It just didn't quite do what we wanted it to do.
I'm wondering something about StarTropics' place. Do you think it was made as kind of a mea culpa for how Zelda 2 was just so different from the original formula that they wanted to
I don't know.
Action game still?
I don't know about that. Like, I think it was.
My quick question would be, but what was Japan after? Because obviously this game wasn't released in Japan. They never intended to release it in Japan. Because Japan didn't care as much about Zelda in 1990. Were they just gearing up?
They had a lot of other. What they were after in Japan was Dragon Quest, and you got so many Dragon Quest clones, and most of them were, or not most of them, but a fair number of them are pretty competent. And you also got a lot of Dragon Quest sequels, and so that's what that market wanted. And they didn't. It's not that they didn't like Zelda. It's just that Zelda didn't have the. It's the same thing as Metroid. It's like a lot of people bought Metroid. But in Japan, but it didn't have the same kind of cachet, I guess you would say, in that market. That, as best as I can gather, I definitely don't know firsthand. I was not living in Japan at the time. I don't live in Japan now. In fact, I've never lived in Japan. So, but I'm just saying, like, based on what I understand, it's like you can find.
Well, you can look at the release schedules,
right?
And this is very unusual. Like, it's so strange that, because this is Nintendo, right? This is Nintendo made a game, and they decided not to release it in Japan, and that's completely decided. No, we're not going to bother.
Yeah, I mean, it's also when it was released. So
it was 1990, so it would have been competing against the SNES or Super Famicom at the time. So Nintendo have done that in the past. They have shifted. Once they release their new console, they just drop the previous one. Like, they just no, we're not making games for that anymore.
It's a relatively small company. That's what people keep forgetting, is that they're more than happy to let other people kind of develop killer apps for their hardware after they've put the hardware out there. And they've always been like that until the Wii U, in which case they just didn't have anybody else to do anything. And they had to do everything, and they kind of upped their release thing, and we'll see what happens with the whatever the Switch, as it's called.
But back to the plot of StarTropics. What do we do?
Yeah, so StarTropics is pretty interesting. It's a top-down action game, action RPG type thing. You play a character, I believe, named Mikey. You show up at an island, and you get a quest based on whatever. You have a weapon. I believe your weapon is a yo-yo all the time, right?
Mm-hmm. You're given the yo-yo, which is some sort of ancient tribal yo-yo weapon, according to the manual.
Believe it or not, the yo-yo is actually a very old hunting type weapon. That's where its roots come from.
Yeah, I believe that there was a yo-yo of some description. This one looks like an American standard yo-yo, though, I believe.
Yes, it does. But I'm just saying, like, in terms of, like, if you want to diss the yo-yo. Actually, no,
I don't want to go one-on-one with someone with a yo-yo made of metal. That would hurt like hell.
I mean, but you could deal with rocks and stuff. But anyway.
But yeah, you get a yo-yo, and it's your permanent weapon. It is your sword in this game as such.
It's really cool. You've got your Mikey is a dude with a baseball cap.
I don't think he wears one, actually.
What? He doesn't?
No, I'm pretty sure he doesn't.
Yeah.
Even though he is a baseball player, all of his weapons are themed around baseball. He does not wear a baseball cap. That is correct.
No, but he gets a bat, he gets actual baseballs to throw, and he gets, I think, baseball cleats, which for some reason give him like super ninja kicking skills when he uses them. I don't know how the logic on that works.
Well, I mean, I think he kicks regularly, and it's just like, well, whatever. Those shoes are smooth. Oh my God, he's wearing cleats. Oh no,
he's descended from ninjas. Who knew?
Maybe that's.
Well, but anyway, yeah. StarTropics itself. I mean, the tropics latter suffix of the title indicates that primarily this game runs on a very interesting island theme, which is very consistent for the most part, except for the last quarter of the game, which somehow takes place in a UFO, but I guess that's a spoiler to say.
You gotta wonder whether this game influenced in any way Link's Awakening, which takes place on an island, a weird island kind of scenario.
That's a really good point. I'm not sure.
Probably not.
I forget if Genyo Takeda had any involvement in Link's Awakening. I don't believe he did. Takeda, who is primarily also known for directing Punch-Out! And Punch-Out! And StarTropics are like his major babies, I suppose. One of Nintendo's more underrated employees.
He must have been fingered at the office as being not... God, wrong choice of words, but it must have been isolated as being like the guy who understands somehow the American market. And I bet you personally, he like went home with was talking to his wife or whatever and said like, they think like I know what Americans want. I don't know what Americans want. I've never even been in the United States. I don't know what they want. Like, what am I supposed to do?
It seems like, yeah, because like it's like their concept of what Americans want is like baseball. Like that's it. Like, this is like baseball.
Like
is
baseball.
just
we like
caps.
baseball. That's the one thing I understand.
Baseball. And what about that Gilligan Island show? That's popular. Let's send Mikey on a 3-island tour.
Oh my God, what am I going to do?
So do you think the reason this never went beyond the NES because just like Japan had just no interest in it, or they just assumed as such?
Well, I mean, it served its purpose, but it got a sequel. It got StarTropics 2: Zoda's Revenge, which is even harder.
I would like to talk StarTropics 2 more if that gets nominated, but it's a very different beast than the first game. I mean, the first one is probably most notable gameplay-wise because it's very strictly appended to a grid. Now, the original Legend of Zelda was 2 in a way, but it's a lot more obvious that you have a grid here because you have to keep leaping around on these squares with, like, water between them, and you can jump, like...
Incredibly weird, but... You know what? I think that they must have based it on was a Konami game. I believe it was an FDS game. Mekujin Dababa.
Yeah, hey, that was the one where you played as like that psychic guy who jumped around. Shoot! I remember playing that one. And
a lot of jumping around in that game too, from square to square.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is a pretty good game, but StarTropics is probably better, I'd say.
You guys have brought in that this game has a jump button, which makes a huge difference between this and the Zelda franchise, which mostly doesn't have the jump button. So they themed the bulk of the puzzles around jumping. There's a lot of jumping on things.
Wait, you could jump in Link's Awakening. Hey.
Yeah. They introduced that. That's more connections. You should just connect all these dots.
Yeah, that's what I tend to do when I don't know what else to talk about.
The grid system is very odd. You can see why they did it when you start to play the game and you kind of like need to aim at certain angles and do very precision movements, but it's really a big pain in the ass. I think there's no way to sort of phrase this like other than like it's not very intuitive to control this game. Like you try and walk up, and if you're looking in a different direction, you have to look up before you can go up, and it's very janked up. I don't know.
It takes some practice to get used to how incredibly strict movement is. I would say it even goes so far as to feel restrictive at some points. Now,
it's really not a good engine for platforming, we can say that much.
It's true, but it doesn't work quite the same way platforming does, because it's got like there's timing elements to it, but you're never going to miss a platform because I just jumped too soon,
the grid is sort of a double-edged sword, because while it does feel more restrictive in some cases, it also reduces error because you're not going to go off target if you mess up this jump, because you almost
which you can do in Link's Awakening, interestingly, because you can hit the edge of the platform and then spiral off.
That's true. That happens a lot.
And which you can do in StarTropics 2, which ditched the precision movement for better or worse. I think
for worse, to be honest.
Yeah.
StarTropics 2 is a very interesting game, but it feels like they were actually StarTropics 2 really does feel like it was like the step before Link's Awakening. Yeah. Maybe we should rank this. I'm not really sure what else we can say about it.
One other thing that I would like to say, just quickly, is we haven't mentioned that the game actually has two different views. The dungeon view is the close-up kind of platformy view, but then it pulls the game out to a much more traditional Dragon Quest, Final Fantasy sort of RPG view, where you kind of like move around towns and stuff.
Not unlike Zelda 2, really.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, only I don't think you get accosted on the world map. Like, all the dungeons are set straight without any random encounters.
True. I remember. It does seem like kind of a spare game. Like, not a spare, but like a very focused game. Like, it's not like expansive in the way Zelda 2 is.
Yeah, StarTropics is actually technically linear. I mean, it's divided clearly.
Linear. Oh my God. 2017. Start over.
The game is more linear, okay, that sounds pretty natural, than any given Zelda title, because it has about 8 acts to it, and once you beat an act, that's done. You're not going back to the area ever. Right. But at the same time, I don't recall there being many permanent power-ups, or if they are, it's almost impossible to miss them. But Yeah, I mean, I do technically appreciate that. Like, it feels complex, but really it's not when you get right down to it, although some dungeons can be pretty nasty. Like, the enemies can get fairly overwhelming at points, especially with the very cardinal directions movement. And there are definitely a few murder boat scenarios.
Indeed.
Harking back to Case Quest 5, where you jump off the edge of the screen and you instantly die and you had no way of knowing that.
Oh, that's the worst.
So I have to... As much as I do like this game, I do have to take off some marks for that, unfortunately.
I also don't really like the way the dungeon system, the way that checkpointing works in it is really weird. You lose your health and you can die if you land in the water. You just instantly die, and then you get thrown to the start of the dungeon sometimes, and everything resets. And there's a checkpoint in there somewhere sometimes. It's really punishing for not successfully beating the dungeon in one go in this game.
That's true. That is a big problem.
Offhand, there are also a lot of switches. I don't know how anyone feels about that, but
very Link's Awakening, I would say.
Yeah.
But I will say before we do rank it, I do kind of like the dialogue in this game. It flows a lot more naturally. They've written it it's actually built for English-speaking language so that people actually speak in multiple sentences. Oh. Their actual, the actual language they use is quite natural.
Pretty good,
and it has some pretty fun little touches. Like you at the very start, you go out and you can talk to a pig and it says oink oink. Then you go talk into a building and they're like, "It's great, we're celebrating having pig for dinner." And I'm like, "Pig screwed."
It can be a pretty funny game at times as well. I mean, it does have a very sort of light-hearted and self-aware.
I think it was done. I think it was translated, not translated, but it was written or whatever by the same person or persons who did the unreleased Earthbound Beginnings or Earthbound Zero Mother. I don't know for sure, but it was about the same time, and it seems to have a little bit of the same kind of whimsy to it that. You can see this now because the Earthbound Beginnings, the thing you can get on Virtual Console, is the translation we would have gotten in North America had that game been released.
Now, whimsy's a good word to describe it. Like, am I the only one who's thinking this game got a little influence from the Goonies because the hero is Mike, and
I think it was definitely I think they were well aware. Yeah. The Goonies too sold a lot of copies.
I would not be surprised, especially since Xerxes was saying along the lines of they probably didn't have a super great idea about the U.S. They almost certainly rented a few whatever U.S. movies that were kind of popular enough and translated in Japan. What do they watch?
Like Zelda, Americans watch the Goonies.
It's a very 80s game where you destroy a giant moai head by throwing baseballs into its mouth. So
it's pretty rad. Yeah. Where do we want to put this? Where do you want to put this on the big old list? It's hard to put it too high because it is a pretty minor game. But, in terms of late period NES games, this is a must play.
I'd stick it around the Quirk range. Is that too low?
I agree.
No,
I agree with that. I love Quirk.
I was putting it much lower than that, so I don't know.
So,
it's
between... Maybe closer to Little Samson?
I would rank it above Little Samson just because I feel like, actually, no. Wait a second. Because this game does get brutally difficult towards the end in a very kind of unfair way.
Once again, the UFO, all bets are off. It's like almost a whole new game and it doesn't like you.
Yeah.
I would... I don't like to put things that I think are kind of a bit not superb above Master of Magic. I like Master of Magic.
I was going to actually say between Master of Magic and Wendy Every Which Way.
I like Wendy better, but I can.
If you like Wendy better, I'd be willing to go one more down. That's up to you guys.
I'm going to say I like it a bit more than G.I. Joe, and I really like G.I. Joe a lot. But I don't know.
I kind of agree. Yeah, if somebody said you could only play one of these games, I would definitely go with StarTropics because it's a little bit more challenging and it's a little bit more. There's just puzzles and things like that involved, and with G.I. Joe, it's just not there. It doesn't have the same replay value.
I would definitely say StarTropics did try. They didn't say, let's just take the Zelda engine and just slap other graphics in it.
Oh, yeah. They could have really phoned this one in, and they didn't. They really tried hard. So
it feels still distinct from Zelda. While I don't know, it's in a sort of weird spot. I mean, I do think its tropical theme does set it much apart from Zelda's sort of fantasy. Also,
as one of the very, very rare Western exclusive Famicom, NES games that really are, if we have are all 5 of our listeners in Japan who are native Japanese, collect Famicom cartridges, etc. Like, you need StarTropics. This is like I would say like it is to Japanese collectors what, I don't know, maybe Murasama Castle or something like that is to.
Speaking of top-down action games, that's actually a pretty good comparison.
Yeah, or something. I mean, there's a lot more in Nintendo published games for the Famicom that we didn't get here, but I would say like this is like one of the ones that you kind of do really want to play. You're not getting the whole Nintendo Famicom NES story unless you play at least the first StarTropics.
So I think we can agree it's going above G.I. Joe. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right, I
agree. That's where it goes.
So can we just sign out on? It's incredible that Mike has not shown up as a playable character in Smash Brothers, even though they already have.
Trophy, right?
Did they even give him like a sticker?
Smash Brothers. I don't remember. He wasn't an assist trophy even, and that is
like they already have a
6
guy
Fire Emblem characters. Come on, Nintendo. He can be
and they have
than that.
A guy who has a baseball bat and a yo-yo. He gets to be in there, and you do have to palette swap him to Mike.
No. You could be so easy.
Wow, I never realized
it would be so easy. That's a good point. All right, our next game is Knights of the Crystallion, which was nominated by @WhitHag on Twitter and developed by Bill Williams, published by US Gold, those purveyors of quality, for the Amiga. Earliest known release date is 1990, no month, no day, in the United States. This is
really it was released in the United States first. I didn't actually grab that one. I didn't notice.
The best information we have.
Honestly, I couldn't really find a lot of info on this game. I just assumed that because a company called US Gold released it.
Wasn't US Gold based in Europe though?
Oh, shit.
I believe so.
But isn't Bill Williams American?
Yes, he was. He was American.
Info in this game has been very scarce. I'm not going to lie.
I don't understand what this game is.
I think the first thing we should probably talk about the creator because we've done a lot of research on him. He's got a really interesting story.
Yeah, no, I actually want to discuss Bill Williams more than the actual game in question. He made a game by the name of Alley Cat, which I played a lot as a kid. It's really ridiculous. You have to have this cat not get hit by boots and go through all these mini games and whatnot. It's a cute and I think really fun arcadey type game, but he's done a lot more than that. Cal, take it away.
Well, I mean, Alley Cat is very, 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 very famous. The original concept for it was from a guy named John Harris, so it's not purely Bill Williams, but it was a game that was loaded on pretty much, it's one of those games that if you had a DOS machine, because it's from way back in 83, 84, it was 83 for Atari 8-bit and 84 for the PC. So a lot of DOS systems had Alley Cat. So I'm sure a bunch of our listeners who are from that time period who had a DOS machine are like, Alley Cat? Oh my God, Alley Cat! But that's not the game we're talking about. That was made by Bill Williams, and he is was somewhat of a prodigy, somewhat of a auteur developer. He died incredibly young at the age of 38, and that's important because he had cystic fibrosis. So he basically learned to program and just poured all of his energy for about 10, 12 years poured all of his energy into making games. So he just put out several really high concept, really interesting games. His first game was called Salmon Run, and that was an Atari 800 game where you played as a salmon, making that, the salmon run where, salmon goes up the stream or whatever. That was the game. He then did a game called Necromancer, which is a hugely interesting game if you've never played or heard of Necromancer. And that's an Atari 800 game. And that's this. A lot of his games are similar in sort of like how they present themselves, because it's a game with 3 sets of mini games that are interconnected. And I highly, highly, highly recommend Necromancer. It's not the game we're talking about, but it is kind of proof that this Bill Williams guy did actually have a really strong idea of what he was going to do. Then he did a couple of other games. He did some other Amiga games, including a Sinbad game. He did a game called Pioneer Plague, which is not what you'd think. It's actually a game where you fly around in a spaceship and shoot things. So who knows why it's called Pioneer Plague. And he sort of capped off his career by making a Monopoly game and Virtual Bart. And he was so disgusted with the industry and corporates that he left forever in 1992.
He did not deserve that at all. Now, here's the thing about Bill Williams and a lot of his games. A lot of them have this kind of overarching theme where they're kind of like a bunch of mini games kind of put together and kind of connected this strategy element. And this one is also similar.
And that's where we kind of lead into Knights of Crystallion, which was, I believe, his last Amiga game. It's hard to call it his, like, big final epic Amiga game, but it probably the closest thing he has to, like, his final, like, masterwork on the Amiga, because he knew he was a pretty gifted programmer. And so what this game is you are the leader of a house in a society that lives inside a giant dead skeleton decaying remains of a titan-sized creature from mythology sort of deal. Called Orodin. Orodrid.
I gotta say, something about this game feels very Dune to me. Is that wrong? Is that incorrect?
It's kind of like it's just ripped out of a bunch of fantasy, I think. Satenger brought up before, so I don't want to steal his thunder on this, but I thought maybe some of it was inspired a bit by Dune, and I really think you can feel that in some ways, because it has like there's a bunch of houses in it that all kind of run the society and run the different resources in it.
Yeah, instead for mining for spice, though, you're mining for these like crystals that come out of the giant skeleton's brain or something like that?
Yes. You go into its skull, and that's the dungeon component part of this game is going into its skull and exploring the skull to collect shards of crystal to power your Crystallion suit in order to get to the center of the skull to collect a Crystallion egg to hatch your Crystallion horse thing. That's the goal of the game.
Why am I laughing?
Has anyone tuned out yet?
Okay. The thing of it is, I have to just say, pardon my French, but what the fuck is this game? Seriously. I have tried my best to wrap my brain around it, but no disrespect to the part of Mr. Williams, but this game just feels excessive. I might say pretentious.
This is such a game that, like...
Really up its own asshole. I'm sorry. I feel bad saying
I don't know if it's pretentious. It's just like... to me, it feels like he had an idea, like build this like society sort of concept, and then he thought, you know what? I'm going to okay, so what would they do? Well, you're going to explore this dungeon, so you need to be able to go into the dungeon, so you got to kind of finance yourself. So I'm going to write a economic mini game marketplace that you'll have to play. And also you'll need to charge your armor in order to not die. So you'll have a mini game that you have to play to charge your armor. And then also, because this is about a quest of kind of enlightenment, a kind of spiritual thing, I'm going to put in like a board game that I'm going to invent, and I'm going to put that in there, which is a little bit like Go, not quite, but I think it's what the inspiration was. And I'm going to put that in, so the player will have to learn that. I'll put a match 2 in, because whatever. And then he crams all of this into one game, and you get a short manual that mostly talks about the economics of the game.
Okay. And
you're let loose into the experience. It is...
That's the thing right there that you have to know about the economic systems of this game.
I'm really bad at math, so maybe this is my failing, but I couldn't understand how the economical sub-part of this game works. I mean, I thought it would have been just a simple thing, like you just have to check whether or not you want this, like in Papers, Please. I mean, a much more modern game, so I'm not sure that's a fair comparison. But no,
it's basically he invented a marketplace like a fictional marketplace that you would then have to engage in the fictional rules of that marketplace in order to generate currency to pay the monks so that they'll let you explore the Sismid, which is the name of the giant head skull that you have to explore. So
this economy only exists because the monks are greedy assholes, is the impression.
That seems to be the main gist of it. And
what is it with monks in these weirdo societies? They're like the overlords.
But that's where one of those Dune inspirations, I think, might come from, maybe. Is Dune has a similar sort of society of like high-ranked religious things going on within the... So anyway, and whatnot. When it comes to actually playing the game, you have to engage in an economic thing, which you can learn. It's not not too hard. It's just the interface is insane. It's built by a crazy person.
That might be a problem with the Amiga. And it is just all entirely controlled by the mouse, but I still didn't exactly know what I was doing when I was attempting to trade off. It didn't even feel like I was really doing anything whenever I went to the Haresh or whatever. That's probably my fault entirely, but it doesn't make it easy to learn itself.
We should say, real quick, I just want to say, the other games in this sort of style, they make a lot more sense. I mean, King of Chicago, you're a mobster in Chicago, and it's just like a mobster movie. Everything works like you expect. But this is weird. Everything has this weird name, and the interface doesn't work particularly well, and that's the problem.
I mean, I personally find it really interesting that instead of trying to simulate, like, sim something, it's like, sim a crazy society in fantasy that doesn't exist. Like, it's just this insane thing to try and concept.
This is an extremely minor and persnickety point, but why are your menu items moving? I mean, you can still hit them easily, but what's with the movement? There's no point to it except to just make it seem weird.
Right, the main menu just rotates around the big skull creature in the background, because of course it does. Why not?
I don't get it. It just bugs me. This game reminds is so strange and alien. I just...
Yeah, well, I like, it's kind of hammers in how alien the themes are. But it reminds me of, if you have like some modern ironic games, like the Arcane Kids sort of titles where everything's just kind of weird and broken for no reason. It reminds me of that, but not ironic. Like, there's no irony here. This is pretty serious. Like, it's not trying to be funny. It's like, no, this is the game. I'm pretty serious about this.
I think maybe it's because it takes itself too seriously that it didn't really click for me. Because, like, this is a weird high concept shit that is really trying to justify itself as its own universe, and it hasn't really convinced me. I mean, I don't know if that's just me being too pessimistic, and once again, I feel like I'm being disrespectful to Bill Williams, talking crap about this game, but I don't know, it's kind of a swing and a miss. I think maybe the problem for me is sort of a too many cooks feel, that they could have removed at least two of the many elements this game has and would have become a much better product. I mean, I often believe in the less is more doctrine when it comes to development, but this just kind of feels like it's crushing itself under its own weight. I don't know.
I think it's, it is a question of whether you needed less. I do find it quite rich to get into once you sort of... The learning curve on this game is very, very high. I mean, almost every word in this game is just made up gibberish. That's just like, what? What?
Yeah, Cal, you ever see Ninja Warrior at all?
Yes.
The warped wall where like a lot of people really blow it in that one, where you have to try and run off this angled wall and grab the top. Like, imagine a wall like that, the size of a battle cruiser or whatever. That's the wall of entry to this game. I don't know if I'm overselling it or whatever.
But okay, so some of the stuff that, I'll knock out a little bit about some of the things. So you have the trading system, which you produce goods and you set buy and sell prices. And there's stuff like sometimes you can maybe buy other people's like houses, products, and you determine what sort of quality of other people's stuff you buy. And sometimes you can open trade routes. Yeah. It kind of makes sense once you wrap what it's presenting and how it's folded it up. So that's, you can push that to the side. The weirdest thing about that is that for some insane reason, the background is constantly scrolling clouds, just constantly scrolling clouds with like this really nice pan flute music for some reason. It's just kind of like, huh?
Could they not render an actual marketplace or something? Like what? Is this a city in the sky that we don't know of?
I do think most of this game was produced by Bill Williams himself. I don't know how much was other people's involvement, so I'd be interested to know. But the next thing is you get to go to the Proda, which you use to charge your armor. And if you don't charge your armor, you'll die in the dungeon minigame very quickly, so try and charge your armor. And you place little balls of crystal, and you collect those crystals from the dungeon, and it's a power generation minigame. And you actually lump crystals together, and then they'll shoot lightning out to a central pillar structure. This is all stuff that you do in the game. I'm not just making things up as I'm talking. This really happens.
Yeah.
And then giant spiders will come down from the roof to eat your crystals, so click them or else they'll eat your crystals. Yeah, don't want them to do that.
That part I understood. And then there's like lizards that can, man-sized lizard creatures that can kill you if you don't throw your bombs at them.
That's in the dungeon. This is in the Proda. The Sismit Proda. Oops. Don't get confused. Okay, confused. So once you charge your armor, and that's the whole minigame, it's actually really cool. It's presented in like this pseudo 3D interface that you've got like spinning pillars that you have to aim lightning bolts at by building basically little lumps of circuits that can actually create slightly more complex circuit chains. It's pretty cool stuff. It's a very interesting puzzle element. Yes, and then we can say you go. Then we'll do the 2 mini games. There is a match 2, which actually doesn't do all that much, but tells you how much you're supposed to donate to the monks if you do it enough, which is actually pretty useful. Because the monks won't tell you how much money they want. You just have to guess. Otherwise, they won't let you go in the Sismit. That's how it works. I think it does some other things, but you have to really get deep into that minigame to get it. It's actually quite a good match, too. The board shifts every time you click, and pieces shift at the same time. It is actually quite a challenging match, too, as far as they go.
Yeah, I can get my head around what's basically concentration, at least.
And then there's the Bozu, which is a kind of odd Go variant played on a spider's web sort of thing.
This one I wasn't able to quite comprehend.
I don't really have time to go into the rules of Bozu. If you really want to know, you could probably have to play the game to figure it out. But
yeah, the
basically,
thing of it is, it's actually mandatory in the Tissimit, or however you pronounce that, because there are these monks that's the cave, which is the main gameplay. And then, sorry, am I getting ahead of you?
That's fine. So when you need to know this because you have to actually complete. You have to beat the AI in this in the dungeon in order to progress further in the dungeon, because of course you do. Why wouldn't you? Rules. If you're going to put Bozu in, why not? And then you kind of get to I believe that leaves the main meat of the game, the Sismit, which is a mouse-driven dungeon exploration thing. I don't believe it's random. I believe it's always the same layout, and I think even between multiple copies of the game. So you could actually draw a map and give it to other people if you wanted. But it's a non-Euclidean maze, because of course it is. So there are a bunch of exits on each screen, and when you go through an exit, who knows where that exit actually ends up? You just have to go through every single exit and figure out which one will eventually lead you to the end of the maze.
Yeah, I had no idea that there was no logical sense that I somehow ended up back at the beginning of it. I mean, I took notice. My sense of direction is pretty good, and I actually took notice of where everything went. And how the hell did I get back up at the beginning anyway? Like, what's with this skull's geometry? Just like chutes and ladders that just fall.
Yeah, it's all over the place. And in that dungeon, if an enemy touches you, you lose a charge in your armor. In a very nice touch, the game will not instantly kill you when you run low on life. It will warn you that if you get hit one more time, you will die, and you can choose to leave the dungeon and surrender your crystals for that session that you've just played.
Yeah.
confused me. I just thought it was some kind of weird way of saying, do you want to go back to the map or do you want to retry the level? Because nothing in this game is said like a regular person would say it.
No, it's all presented in theme. You get no, there's no fourth wall breaking in this game. It's all presented as if you are there, and that's how it works, including they do acknowledge the mouse, but they only acknowledge the mouse to get you to do what they want you to do, like left click to continue, right click to not do this thing, that's how that works. And I think that the dungeon is kind of a cool little, the system is kind of pretty cool because you right click to move through the dungeon, and you left click to shoot fireballs out. And you can shoot up 3 fireballs at once, and they'll travel across the map and then explode quite dramatically. And if you hold down the left click, the balls will travel faster while you're holding it down, which is just because, yes, of that. That's how that works. Eventually, you'll go through a door, which you won't be able to see, but when you leave the area, a door will open, and it will break open the copy protection suddenly, where it will ask you to a question from the poetry supplement that comes with the game. And if you don't answer it correctly, you won't be able to progress in the game. You have to win a game of Bozu, and then the game basically repeats with harder and longer dungeons with more graphics until I think you get your Crystallion. And that is my complete explanation of Crystallion, the game.
I'm going to be honest. I think that the dungeon crawling is relatively okay. That's the part that's easiest to understand, at least for me. It's just that all this other stuff tacked onto it on the side feels superfluous. It just feels like the dungeon crawling could just mainly be its own game if this game was more straightforward and committed to the central gameplay idea. I would have liked this more, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just an idiot, but just a lot of it outside of the Tizimit just felt like it didn't want to really be learned. I don't know.
It is an utterly confusing, very unique thing.
Yeah, I'm not going to deny that this game's unique. I almost hate using this word because it smacks of pretension, but I'll admit it's a very visionary title. If nothing else, it's artistic in its own way, and it is quite committed to its own universe, for better or worse. Whether or not that makes it enjoyable, I mean, for some people probably like this. I don't think I did exactly, but I don't want to be too unfair to this very, very strange game. I just have no idea how the hell to rank it.
Yes, it is like a 1990 game. It is kind of early on, and it's a Amiga exclusive, and the Amiga's not super well known for having, strong RPG titles, really. It's not really a system that had that many, role-playing games. As far as I remember, it's mostly known for platformers.
This is leagues beyond Hurricane.
Yeah, you can't even compare the two. I mean, kudos that we have another exclusive Amiga game on here, but...
It actually uses a special Amiga graphics mode called Ham mode, which I just wanted to say Ham mode. It's short for hold and modify, but it's a mode that was very rarely used in games, but it's the high color mode, and there's a variety of reasons why it wasn't used in most games, because it's actually really difficult to use and it doesn't work well with animation. But this game does use, so it's a very bright game for the most part in most of the areas.
That's
so it uses
colorful.
a very odd mode.
Yeah, I'll give it that too. It's a very colorful game also.
Here's my thought. There was real effort put in this game. He was trying to do something unique and new, something that no other game had probably ever done, and he succeeded. I mean, it is a very unique game, a very personal game, I'd say.
I would say so. You can see elements of the creator in here, for sure. And I do find that it's quite interesting that I think this game is so odd and so difficult that even if you've played a lot of games, you'll struggle to find a sort of point of reference in this game to really hold what the game is trying to do and really focus on it. Because you can get the dungeon stuff and you can get some things, but but it kind of fits together. How do you play it all so that it works? And it's it's a confusing game, and also the game does have I wouldn't describe it as a real-time system, but each area you go into, the game progresses a time, like it goes a season forward every time you choose an option on the main screen, and that's how the economic system moves forward every season. There's costs and expenditures, and the system moves, so you have to keep an eye on your expenses. You can't just focus on the dungeon, and at the same time, you probably should learn Bozu and play some of the other game, which I can't remember the name of it. Darda or something. That's the Match 2 game. I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah, cards. Deketa, was it? Hmm?
Yeah, that's probably it. Yeah, because it's like deck of cards. This game is remarkably interesting. If you haven't played, I'm glad this was another one that I'm like, wow, I didn't know this game existed.
This is a game I'm not sure any other podcast would have talked about in millions of years. I mean, prove me wrong if there is anything else ever recently that's talked about Knights of the Crystallion, but I am actually glad we've covered this one. It's just, I don't know what to say about it. It's just so weird. And I don't know if it's actually good or not. I'm at a loss here. I'm just baffled.
I did find the experience of playing this game and learning what it was doing. I found that quite enjoyable to actually engage with this game, because that was something that I was quite impressed with. That most of the systems don't feel tacked on. They feel like they're whole components, even if it's only exist to do one system for another system. Each one doesn't feel like it was a slap-together rush job. Each segment of the game feels coherent and built correctly, which I think is good. We're going to have to move to ranking this one, I think, because I could try and determine what the hell this game is about all day, but we'll have to
first off
rank it.
Place it somewhere, and then I don't want to shortchange this game. Just because I didn't really gel with it doesn't necessarily mean it's bad.
Okay, well, my placement at the moment would be above Golden Axe.
That seems a bit high.
That far up, though? Dude,
I will put it wherever I'm putting it. You guys...
doesn't mean I wanted to put it on the upper half of the list.
I find it an interesting game. A very, very interesting game.
I'd say close to like Techno Cop, I think.
Yeah, unfortunately,
I think Technocop is a bit low for it, like a little low. I mean, you're putting it below Revolution X. Is that what you want? Is that what you're doing? Like,
I was going to.
I understand Revolution X. I don't know if I'd say it's good, but it makes sense.
I was going to put it below Riven, so maybe that's just me being too harsh. Okay, we'll work up from Revolution X at least, I guess. I mean, I don't know.
I think it's an interesting game, and I think if you can get into it, you'll probably enjoy it. It's not his best game. I think both Alley Cat and Necromancer are more approachable, and even his other Amiga games, Mind Jack? I don't think so. I think it might be Mind.
I wish.
I think Mind Jack's the PlayStation game, but he's got like a Mind Hack or a Mind Warp or some other game which I think is a little bit more sensical. Not very much more sensical, by the way. Like his all of his games are a little off, but it is an interesting game. If you guys want to push it down, that's I can't question that. I would probably, if I would still want it a little higher. Because Revolution X, but it's such a it's a bland shooter that.
But it's got Aerosmith,
it just exists.
Man. Music is the weapon.
I don't care about Aerosmith.
Yeah, I don't
never care. Okay. But this game tries something, and it's very, very high concept, very, very interesting, and it is a autorial game. It is a game that, if this game would actually make more sense released today, like some crazy indie was just like, this is the game I wanted to make, and I made it.
It would be probably better to explain in a modern game scope, where if you can't even give an elevator pitch for your game, then it's not going to fly at all. But
I mean, it's a slice of life simulator set in Orodin.
Yeah, I just okay.
Yeah, it's a tough one. Can we put it above Uniraces?
You know, I was going to say between Clash at Demon Head and Commander Keen in this case.
I would like to put it. I mean, obviously, I like to put it above King because I already said that. But I am willing to say that this game, you know, Commander Keen is a technical accomplishment that's an okay game. This game is, I don't know how much of a technical accomplishment it is, but Keen is super approachable. You can get Keen.
That's a good point.
I don't know.
So how about
this game is not approachable?
No. Okay. How about between Keen and Uniracers then?
I think that's fair. As much I do like this game, and I would put it high because I think it's actually a really interesting title. But I wouldn't be happy below Revolution X, but I can handle below Keen because at least Keen, you get what you get the game, you get a game. It makes sense. It's technically quite good. This game is an interesting accomplishment.
Okay, yeah, I will say that Crystallion is certainly very remarkable, even if I didn't really cater to it all that much. It's outstanding, I don't know, do we even want to go so far to call this one a hidden gem in a way?
I would say it's a hidden gem on the Amiga because often with the Amiga, people dismiss most of the library, like, oh, it's mostly like just pretty platformers that don't play very well. And then you've got a game like Crystallion, which is just this most... Like, this game feels like it would have been it feels more like a PC game, like it would have been a PC simulation game. Like, that's what it feels like.
You know, and yet, comparing it to other Euro platformers, I never thought of it like that before. It does definitely stand out a lot more than those, I can say that.
Like, on the Amiga in 1990, there was very little like this. And, you know, that's a specific game that presents a very alluring world because you actually get a world presented to you. It's very, very well detailed in how it presents itself. It's just a game that I don't think very many people will be able to actually get into because you have to read the manual, then you have to actually discern what the hell the manual was telling you, and then you have to put it into practice. And that's a lot of steps, and that is probably why it has been pushed quite lower, but if you can get into it, it's well worth giving it a shot. If you can't, grab Necromancer.
Or Alley Cat.
Or Alley Cat. You can grab... You don't really need the manual for Alley Cat, but maybe read the manual for Necromancer because it's a bit weird. But those are interesting games, and they're a lot easier to actually get into, and you can see what they're about. And then if you want a game that makes almost no sense until you play it for a couple hours, load up Crystallion.
And if you want something like Crystallion but a bit less unique, you could play Defender of the Crown or King of Chicago. Those are pretty impressive for 80s games.
Well, rest in peace, Bill Williams. I'm sorry I didn't really take to Crystallion much, but I do have to give credit to where it is. It's an extremely unique game, and I'm glad we got so much discussion out of it.
That's all for this episode of Hardcore Gaming 101's Top Games podcast. Special thanks goes out to @TreehouseJPN on Twitter and Fel_temps_reparatio on iTunes. Great name. For nominating those games. And thanks as well to those of you we haven't gotten to yet. We will be getting to you soon. Thanks to my lovely co-hosts and compatriots and our editor Jeff Brood and our chiptune composer Muteki. And of course, thanks to the support and feedback of listeners like you. You can support this podcast by making a small monthly donation at patreon.com/HG101. I know I did. You can also help us out by subscribing to the HG101 YouTube channel, which is excellent, and by following at HG_101 and at GC9X on Twitter. But most importantly, help us claw our way into the podcasting firmament by getting on iTunes, subscribing to HG101, and giving us a 5-star review. Do it or be perceived as different from your peers. Until next week, keep keeping it real.